I Japanese wrestling every now and then, mostly because it's absolutely insane. Upon looking for a fighting game to cover in a new video, I remembered that a Japanese wrestling fighting game already exists, so there you go. Released as a PS2 exclusive in 2004, Rumble Roses is exactly that, except it focuses on women's wrestling specifically. Real-world women's wrestling is pretty cool, and these girls are legitimate athletes and entertainers, especially the ones in Japan, and I'm sure you've seen images like this floating around the internet, so a game based on stuff like this should be really awesome. Now, despite my love for virtual fisticuffs, I've never actually played this game before, so trying Rumble Roses for the first time will be a totally new experience for me. Also, this game was developed by famed pachinko company Konami and Yuke, the studio that used to make all the annual WWE games. With Yuke's wrestling game expertise and Konami's love of waifus, Rumble Roses should be a slam dunk, and it seems like a really fun time. However, the elephant in the room for some people is that due to the game's admittedly sexually charged nature, Rumble Roses can come across as being a bit vulgar or maybe tone deaf, but look, for this video, I personally am not going to be super negative and judge the game for any of this, because I know it's part of the game's appeal, so don't worry. But look, you get the point now, so let's dive into the insane world of Rumble Roses. For starters, there are plenty of characters here, but I want to focus on the gameplay mechanics first. Rumble Roses has 7 attack buttons, and taunts are mapped to the right stick. You can strike and perform combos with square, run with cross, grab with triangle, etc., so every button on the controller does something that you'd find in an actual pro wrestling match. A basic strategy is to use square to perform a combo and then go for a pin when the enemy falls down, and if you're lucky enough, they won't break out. R1 also lets you perform counterattacks or block, so if your opponent tries to get the upper hand, send their attack back at them. Every character in this game has an absurd amount of moves, so good luck remembering them all if you ever play this game seriously. But if you just want to play it casually with friends like me, then you've just got to remember some basic combos and counters, so the barrier for entry overall for the game is quite low, which is really good. There are many kinds of attack types that correspond to different regions of the body, so you can choose to specifically target the enemy's head, chest, legs, etc., and it leads to a strategic combat system. While you can't outright disable the opponent by breaking one of their bones, because that would be pretty hardcore, they do get weakened over time, so if you notice that they try and run away a lot, give them a kick to the legs. You can win a match by pinning the opponent for 3 seconds, and seeing this countdown is really tense, especially if you've been fighting for a while and time is almost up. Even though Rumble Roses came out 20 years ago as of recording this video, the game still feels nice and fluid, to be honest. I was expecting this game to feel really jank and pretty clunky, but I'm able to run around and perform combos with no issues, and it feels quite nice when I play it. Knocking the enemy down and then jumping on them from the top rope is always good fun, and there aren't any control quirks that prevent me from doing this, or any of the other maneuvers in the game. Speaking of maneuvers, Rumble Roses has plenty of them, from crazy grabs to flying drop kicks and even humiliation moves. This game has a lot of theatrical animations. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but Rumble Roses isn't trying to be some thoughtful, respectful depiction of women's wrestling. Instead, you've got crazy stuff like this. So while the game's very, I guess, TNA sense of humor won't appeal to everyone, I think it's pretty funny as a sort of time capsule back to the early 2000s. It reminds me a lot of Dead or Alive in that regard, and they both share the curse of being really fun games that will make people look at you weirdly if they see you playing it. Anyway, real-world wrestling has plenty of exaggerated characters who all have their own unique moves and stage personas, so it goes without saying that the performance aspect of the sport is a major component, and it translates into Rumble Roses brilliantly through its character designs and animations. Whether you're participating in a traditional wrestling match or doing some mud wrestling, there are a lot of fun moments to be had with Rumble Roses gameplay mechanics, especially when you combo the poison mist into a funny-looking takedown. The game also has plenty of characters, and they're all quite unique looking. The main gimmick here is that every character has a face and a heel variant, referring to wrestlers who are meant to be the good and the bad guys in the story respectively. Reiko, for example, has Rowdy Reiko as her heel, and each variation in the game looks completely different. Faces and heels also have different movesets, so that technically means the game has over 20 characters, which is more than I was expecting going in. Also, according to an IGN article I found about the game during my research, each character has over 10,000 polygons that make up their character models, and this is quite the technological achievement, especially for a game this old on the PS2. Even today, I still think this is a nice looking game, and even though the background NPCs and some textures can appear flat and plain at times, the characters themselves are amazing looking. My favorite character is Killer Khan, not because we have the same name, but because I love her face paint and the aforementioned poison mist. This is Killer Khan's killer move, a mechanic that can be activated when you have at least 1 bar of meter. If you press L1 when in front of the enemy, you'll trigger an awesome looking cinematic that can do some nice damage to the opponent, so I'd recommend going for this move if you can. The other major attack is your humiliation move, and this can be performed when the enemy's heart meter is filled all the way. These both look painful and pretty NSFW, so I'm going to be safe and blur some of them for this video just to not get age restricted. While Rumble Roses doesn't have any explicit nudity, it has a 12+ rating after all, a lot of the moves and the character designs are quite revealing and they don't exactly leave much to the imagination, but I'd be lying if I say I didn't enjoy it. The whole game is just so silly and dumb and immature to the point where I can't help but laugh and have fun with it. And honestly, only the Japanese can make a game as crazy as this. But it only gets crazier due to the game's story mode. Yes, this game has a story mode, and I'm expecting something as gripping as 7 when I do this mode, damn it.
With the box! What was in the box?
Because I envy your normal life.
Put the gun down, baby.
It seems that envy is my sin.
Oh, what's in the box?
Much like in Tekken, the story mode in Rumble Roses is different for each character, so that means there are 22 possible stories for you to explore. Now, I must say that this game's story mode has some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard, seriously.
I made many vows lately, and cannot be great warrior. Maybe time to go home.
I have no idea why Killer Khan is speaking in broken English or why the camera is lingering on her cleavage half the time, but it screams peak 2000s political correctness. I wasn't expecting Shakespeare when I went into this mode, but even after finishing it with Killer Khan, I still had no idea what the game's plot is actually about. Killer Khan's story route has 5 fights, with one of them being a mud wrestling match, but there are only 3 cutscenes here. Even though the characters' chests have more depth than their personalities, I would have liked to learn more about them, especially Killer Khan. She looks so cool, and learning more about her backstory as Eigel's heel persona is a bit of a missed opportunity in my opinion. Anyway, after making our way through some regular fights, we stumble across Makoto, which lets us witness some more amazing voice acting.
No! I, Killer Khan!
But you sure look like Eigel.
Makoto is timid girl. Eigel already said not Eigel.
I knew it. You are Eigel.
Makoto dare to mock?
Wow!
Makoto too weak. Cannot beat Killer Khan.
Just like that, we're in a fight, and after defeating our opponent, a horse suddenly appears out of nowhere and we get another cutscene.
What? So what do you plan on doing now?
Become Emperor.
Huh?
Makoto surprised? Killer Khan, great ruler who one day conquer world.
Not likely. I'd let that dream go.
No! Killer Khan, go forth today!
Eigel, wait! You need some serious help. Eigel, do you have to go?
Makoto, ugly goat.
Hey!
Yep, that's literally how the game ends. No final boss, no character development, nothing in the story route, just that. I played this mode early in the morning after not being able to sleep for around 24 hours straight, so let me tell you that on my first playthrough, this really confused me. As far as I can tell, some characters in the game just happen to have really short story routes. Google tells me that the game's storyline is about Lady X hosting a wrestling tournament to try and capture the other characters or something, but I don't think that anyone, even the developers of the game, took this mode seriously. Some storylines are more cohesive than Killer Khan's, thankfully. Switching over to Reiko now, we learn that her mother, Kamikaze Rose, has passed away, and that Reiko is trying to find her missing sister, while also proving that she's the strongest wrestler around. After some more cutscenes and matches, we fight Lady X as the final boss, and beating her shows us the final cutscene. Reiko's story arc may be a bit cliche, but at least we get a proper ending that doesn't involve the horse, and there are lots of cutscenes littered throughout the story mode. All of this is kind of driving me mad, and there are still 20 other stories in the game that I haven't even touched yet. I don't have the time, or honestly the hard drive space, to record playthroughs for every single one of these storylines, but I played through some of them off camera and they were just as funny as Killer Khan's and Reiko's, so I beg you to try one of these stories out if you ever played this game. They're really stupid, but I mean that in the best possible way. What I quickly realized is that due to this game being about scantily clad women wrestling each other for the audience's entertainment, the storyline is the least important aspect of the game, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when the voice acting was being recorded. Speaking of voice acting specifically, Rumble Roses has some legitimately talented voice actors, so I have no idea how it all went horribly wrong. Donna Burke, Bianca Allen, and Lenny Hart, the Tekken 8 voice who screams, "New Challenger!" in the character trailers all appear in this game, and I'd love to hear about their experiences working on Rumble Roses. If the characters were all voiced by Japanese voice actresses who are speaking English as a second language, I'd understand, but as this isn't the case, I've now been damned to an eternity of confusion. The biggest criticism I have regarding story mode, however, is that it's very repetitive, not to mention easy. My strategy was to just go for arm submissions over and over again until I won the match, and this worked every single time. If you're going to play through multiple storylines, I recommend doing around 1 or maybe 2 at a time, and then taking a break before you continue. While I do genuinely enjoy the game's combat system, animations, and wild cutscenes, There's only so much I can take in a single sitting. But what if you want to explore another mode? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there are a few extra bits of content for you to interact with in the game. You can participate in a regular wrestling match, a mud wrestling match, and even a title fight. By using the Vow system, you can level up your character's alignment, and you can fight the champion when it's at 100%. So for example, because Reiko is a face, you have to accomplish certain face tasks to level up. There's also a gallery mode, and this allows you to view the character models animating in real time with a variety of camera angles. Rumble Rose's gallery also lets you view personal information about the characters, including their voice actor. So I'd like to officially thank Terry Osada for giving us the voice of Killer Khan.
Makoto like ugly goat next to beautiful Killer Khan.
Rumble Roses also lacks any sort of online functionality, so overall there isn't a whole lot of content here. If you're content with playing the game in short bursts from time to time, it's a worthwhile investment, but I can't recommend it for people who like to dig deep into fighting game single-player content, simply because there isn't much here. After the hilarity of the story mode goes away, you're left with a bunch of repetitive fights in the same arenas, so it does get a bit dull when the thrill wears off eventually. Despite me being pretty positive about the game so far, a lot of reviewers didn't agree, and the game sits at a 66 on Metacritic as a result. After reading reviews for the game, I noticed that reviewers generally praise the wrestling mechanics, saying that they were legitimately enjoyable. As Rumble Roses heavily features sexuality as part of its appeal, the game ran the risk of being nothing more than some cheap PS2 titillation. But the well-thought-out combat system and the animations thankfully prevented the game from falling into this trap. The game's visuals were praised too, with the high polygon count in the character models and their detailed facial expressions being considered some of the most awesome parts of the game. Okay, all of this is well and good, but the reception certainly wasn't perfect, however. In the eyes of reviewers, the game's lack of content, dreadful voice acting, and unfulfilling story modes were its biggest drawbacks, with its sexualization being another point of contention for some. The most interesting observation I happened to make when reading the reviews is that some reviewers were like, yeah, this game is really cool and we love how suggestive it is, whereas other reviewers were like, the suggestive nature of the game is really gross and we wish the gameplay took priority. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder after all, so your thoughts on video game sexualization will definitely impact how you view the game. Rumble Roses was always going to be very divisive because of this, and although some may disagree, I commend the developers for making the game that they wanted to create. In terms of the game's legacy, it actually received a sequel for the Xbox 360 in 2006. Rumble Roses XX gets rid of the story modes, but it adds in many new modes, including tag team fights and online play, so you know I'm gonna make a video covering this game in future. Aside from that, the game also received a short manga adaptation, although I haven't been able to find a whole lot of details about this due to how obscure it is. I really hope this series continues somehow in the future. Video games that feature any sort of sexuality are kind of murdered by the games media before they release nowadays, especially the Japanese ones. So I think that if Konami were to release a third Rumble Roses game that doesn't tone down any of the sexuality or the campy nature, you can expect to see many articles condemning the game. I totally understand that this isn't realistic though, but as someone who likes to watch Japanese wrestling, I wish we had more games like this. Japanese wrestling games with super wacky characters aren't very common now that I think about it, and it's a shame that this is the case. If I can somehow get the ability to perform a head submission on Rowdy Reiko in 4K graphics at 60 FPS in a new Rumble Roses, I think I'll never have to play another game again. Overall, Rumble Roses is pretty crazy, and I'm really happy that I finally checked it out after all these years. If you liked what you saw in this video, definitely try this game out, and see if you can play it with a friend if you can. The rampant sexualized content and the general lack of maturity may be a turn-off for some, but I personally enjoyed these aspects of the game. The best way I can describe it is that Rumble Roses is like a sexy version of KFC. You know that it's not the healthiest or the most nutritional thing for you to consume, and while it may leave you with a sense of profound shame when you're finished, I'd be a lying man if I said it wasn't fun in the moment. Okay, look, gross analogies aside, this game really isn't for everyone, but if the game's puerile and kind of suggestive childlike tone appeals to you, then you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. Okay, that's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.